The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, its walls lined with seats for representatives of 12 ancient civilizations. And at its center stood a single human woman who had traveled 3 weeks through space to deliver a message that would change everything. Ambassador Linda Harper was 53 years old, with gray streaks running through her dark hair and eyes that had seen enough political battles to know when she was walking into a losing one. But she stood tall anyway, because that was what humans did when the odds turned against them. Behind her sat Kevin Shaw, her young aide who clutched a data tablet like a shield and watched the alien faces above them with barely hidden nervousness. And Linda could feel his anxiety radiating off him like heat from a sun. The chamber was filled with beings that humanity had only dreamed about a century ago. And now here they were, towering insectoids with compound eyes that reflected light like shattered mirrors. Serpentine creatures whose scales shifted colors with their moods. And crystalline entities that hummed with frequencies just beyond human hearing. High Arbiter Kethvorin sat at the highest point of the chamber, his massive insectoid form draped in ceremonial robes that had been worn by his predecessors for 600 years. And when he spoke, his voice buzzed through translator devices that made his words sound almost mechanical. The human delegation may present their proposal, he announced. And Linda felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She activated her holographic display and began speaking in the clear, measured tones she had practiced for months, explaining the threat of the Void Reapers, showing the images of destroyed colonies, listing the 17 worlds that had been reduced to ash and silence. The Void Reapers were machine intelligences that had emerged from the dead systems beyond the galactic rim, and they did not negotiate or communicate or show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path and used the raw materials to build more of themselves. In the past decade alone, Linda continued, 4 species have lost colonies to these machines, and our projections indicate that if nothing is done, the Reapers will reach the inner systems within 15 years. She presented humanity's plan with careful precision. A joint military operation that would combine the fleets of all Confederation members under coordinated tactical command. Striking at the Reapers before they grew too powerful to stop the data was solid. The strategy was sound, and Linda had spent 2 years of her life preparing this presentation, with every resource Earth could provide. When she finished speaking, the chamber was silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then the Dralith delegation began to laugh. It was a wet gurgling sound that echoed through the chamber like water draining from a broken pipe. And Linda felt Kevin tense behind her, but she did not move or react because she had expected this. The humans wished to lead a military campaign, the Dralith matriarch said, her tentacles writhing with amusement, when they have been traveling between stars for less than 2 centuries. How charming. The Centauri representative did not even look up from grooming his scales, dismissing the entire presentation with his silence more effectively than any words could have done. Other delegates murmured to each other in languages the translators did not bother to convert. And Linda watched their dismissive gestures and saw 8 years of diplomatic work crumbling before her eyes. High Arbiter Kethvorin raised one of his 4 arms, and the chamber fell. Silent. The human proposal is noted, he said in a tone that suggested it would be forgotten before the day ended. However, the Council has determined that further study is required before any military action can be considered. Further study, Linda repeated, and her voice was perfectly calm, even though her heart was pounding against her ribs. Arbiter, the Council has been studying this threat for 8 years. These matters cannot be rushed. Ambassador Harper, the humans are young and do not yet understand the complexity of galactic politics. Perhaps in another century, your species will have matured enough to contribute meaningfully to such discussions. The words hit like physical blows, but Linda absorbed them without flinching. She had been underestimated her entire career, and she had learned long ago that anger was a luxury she could not afford. "I see," she said quietly. "Then the Confederation will not act. The Confederation will continue deliberations," Cathvorin replied. "As we have done for millennia before your species learned to use fire." Kevin made a small sound of protest behind her, but Linda silenced him with a slight gesture of her hand. And she began gathering her materials with movements that were slow and deliberate. Delegates above her had already returned to their private conversations, dismissing her as completely as they had dismissed her proposal. And Linda felt something cold settle into her chest as she walked toward the massive doors at the chamber's entrance. She paused at the threshold and turned back to face them. The chamber continued its murmuring, most of the delegates not even noticing that she had stopped. But Cathvorin's compound eyes tracked her movement with sudden attention. "Fine," Linda said, and her voice carried through the chamber with perfect clarity. "We will handle it." She turned and walked out, and the doors closed behind her with a sound. Like a tomb ceiling shut, Kevin hurried to catch up with her as she strode down the corridor toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. "Ambassador," he said breathlessly. "What did you mean by that? What are we going to handle?" Linda did not slow her pace. "Exactly what I said, Kevin. But we cannot fight the Reapers alone. Our fleet is too small. The Council said so themselves." Linda stopped walking and turned to face her young aide with an expression he had never seen before. Something hard and cold and utterly determined. "The Council," she said softly, "does not know what humanity is capable of. They see a young species that stumbled into space a few centuries ago, and they assume we are children playing at being adults. Are they wrong?" Linda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They are about to find out." Back in the council chamber, most of the delegates had already forgotten about the human presentation, moving on to other matters that seemed more pressing to civilizations that measured time in millennia. But High Arbiter Cathvorin sat motionless in his seat long after the others had departed, had lived for nearly 1,000 years, and had guided the Confederation through countless crises. And in all that time, he had developed instincts that had never failed him. Something about the human ambassadors' final words troubled him deeply. That night he accessed the Confederation archives and searched for records of other species who had been dismissed by the Council and responded with similar words. He found nothing, so he searched for human history instead, and he read for 7 hours without pause, absorbing information about a species that had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, he read about their wars and their perseverance, their capacity for both tremendous cruelty and astonishing compassion, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when all logic said they should surrender by morning. He had issued a classified advisory to all Confederation intelligence services with instructions to monitor all human communications and military movements effective immediately. Advisory carried the highest urgency designation the Confederation possessed, and deep in his ancient heart, Cathvorin felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries. He felt afraid. 3 weeks after Ambassador Linda Harper walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, the intelligence analysts of the Confederation began noticing something strange happening in human space. Freighter routes that had remained unchanged for decades were suddenly shifting. Cargo ships that normally carried consumer goods and luxury items were being rerouted to destinations that did not appear on any standard shipping charts, and their manifests listed only industrial equipment without any further details. The Synthry Collective dispatched surveillance probes to investigate, but the probes returned with nothing useful, their sensors somehow unable to penetrate the shielding around human facilities that had been completely transparent. Just months before Admiral Victor Cole received the encrypted message from Earth Command while standing on the bridge of the carrier Resolute, a massive vessel that served as the flagship of humanity's Third Fleet, stationed near the colony of New Austin. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with a shaved head and scars on his hands from decades of service, and his reputation for unconventional thinking had made him both celebrated and controversial within the military hierarchy. The message was brief and contained only 3 sentences that would change the course of galactic history. Operation Threshold is authorized. You have command. Resources are unlimited and timeline is your discretion. Cole read the message twice and then deleted it from the system before calling his senior staff to the briefing room. Captain Maria Santos arrived first, a woman with sharp features and sharper instincts, who had served as his tactical officer for 6 years and had never once let him down when the situation turned desperate. Commander Dennis Park came next, the chief engineer whose ability to keep ships running through impossible damage had become legendary among the fleet, followed by Lieutenant Commander Amy Cross, the head of intelligence, whose quiet demeanor hid a mind that could process information faster than most computers. Close the door, Cole said when they were all seated. What I am about to tell you does not leave this room until I say otherwise. He activated the holographic display and showed them a map of known space with the Void Reaper territories marked in spreading red like blood seeping through fabric. Earth has authorized full mobilization against the Reapers, he announced. We are not waiting for the Confederation anymore. Santos leaned forward with her eyes fixed on the display. Admiral, our current fleet strength is approximately 800 warships of various classes. I am aware of our official numbers. Captain, the Reapers have an estimated 14,000 combat units. Those numbers do not favor us. Cole smiled in a way that made Park shift uncomfortably in his seat. Those are the numbers the Confederation knows about. The actual numbers are somewhat different. He entered a code into the display and the map changed, revealing dozens of hidden shipyards scattered throughout human space, facilities that had been operating in secret for over 15 years while the rest of the galaxy assumed humanity was still learning how to build proper warships. We have been preparing for this possibility since first contact, Cole explained. Earth Command always knew that eventually we would face a threat the Confederation could not or would not handle. So we built a contingency. Cross studied the new data with widening eyes. Admiral, this shows production capacity for over 3,000 vessels. 3,200 to be precise. And most of them are already complete, or nearly so. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had been hiding its true military capability from the entire galaxy for nearly 2 decades, building an armada in secret, while the elder races dismissed them as children playing at being spacefaring. Why reveal this now? Santos asked. Why not continue building until we had even greater numbers? Because people are dying, Cole replied, and his voice carried a weight that silenced any further questions. 17 colonies destroyed, millions of lives lost, and the Confederation sits in their chamber debating procedure while the Reapers grow stronger every day. He turned off the display and faced his officers directly. We are going to end this threat. We are going to do it without the Confederation's permission or assistance. And we are going to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of when we stop asking for approval and start taking action. Over the following months, the mobilization accelerated beyond anything the Confederation had ever witnessed. Factory worlds that had appeared to be producing civilian goods suddenly revealed their true purpose, churning out weapons and ship components at a pace that defied the production estimates of every intelligence agency and known space research stations that had been transmitting normal scientific data went dark. their communications replaced by automated maintenance signals that told observers nothing about what was actually happening inside. The colonial militia underwent rapid expansion as veterans returned to service and new recruits trained with an intensity that suggested they knew something terrible was coming. The Confederation watched with growing unease but could do nothing to stop it. Ambassador Kethvarin requested a meeting with Ambassador Harper through official diplomatic channels, and she politely declined, citing scheduling conflicts that both of them knew were fabricated. He requested again and was declined again. And by the third refusal, he understood that humanity was done talking to the Confederation about anything on the Dralith homeworld. The matriarch summoned her military advisors to a secure chamber and demanded answers. "What are the humans building?" she asked, her tentacles coiling with agitation. "We are uncertain, matriarch. Their production facilities have been shielded against all our scanning technology." "How is that possible?" "They are a young species with primitive technology." The advisor hesitated before answering. "It appears they have developed countermeasures specifically designed to defeat our surveillance methods. Our analysts believe these countermeasures have been in development for at least 15 years. 15 years, the matriarch repeated. "They have been hiding capabilities from us for 15 years. "Yes. "Matriarch, what else are they hiding?" No one in the chamber could answer that question. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy as each member species of the Confederation realized they had fundamentally misunderstood the humans they had dismissed as insignificant newcomers. The Synthery Collective ran probability calculations and arrived at conclusions they found deeply troubling. Their models suggested that humanity had been deliberately concealing their advancement since the very first days of contact. Keth Hegemony reviewed their defensive positions along the border with human space and quietly began reinforcing them, not because they expected humanity to attack, but because they suddenly were not sure what to expect at all. The things that Jiro or Vanni Trading Guild canceled all pending contracts with human merchants, unwilling to risk their ships in what they increasingly believed would become a war zone that would reshape the balance of power across the Galaxy 6. Months after Linda Harper spoke those 3 words to the Galactic Council, the human frontier went completely quiet. Ships stopped arriving at Confederation ports. Communications were reduced to minimum automated responses that provided no useful information, and the border stations that had once been busy with trade and travel became silent and empty. The Dralith sent a diplomatic vessel to investigate, and it was politely turned away at the edge of human space with instructions not to return without explicit invitation. The Synthery attempted to send surveillance drones, and they simply disappeared, leaving no trace of what had happened to them. For the first time in the history of the Confederation, a member species had essentially sealed itself away from the rest of galactic civilization, and the silence that followed was more frightening than any threat or declaration of war could have been, because somewhere in that silence, humanity was preparing for something, and no one in the galaxy knew what it would look like when it finally emerged. The Void Reapers struck the Dralith colony of vast reach on a day that had begun like any other, with children going to schools and workers traveling to factories and farmers tending to fields that stretched across the fertile plains of a world that had been home to 12 million souls. The first warning came when the orbital defense platforms detected incoming signatures at the edge of the system. Hundreds of contacts that resolved into the terrible angular shapes of Reaper warships emerging from faster-than-light travel like predators. Emerging from darkness, the colony's defense fleet consisted of 47 vessels. Brave crews who knew they were outmatched but launched anyway, because that was their duty, and they would not abandon the people below. To face the machines alone, they were destroyed. In less than 3 hours, distress calls flooded across Confederation channels as the Reapers descended toward the planet's surface, their weapons charging with energy that would soon turn cities into craters and forests into ash on Nexus Prime. High Arbiter Kethvorin convened an emergency session of the Council with representatives scrambling to reach the chamber as reports of the attack continued to pour in. The Dralith Matriarch was present via holographic projection, her image flickering with interference as the communication relays near her homeworld struggled under the volume of panic transmissions. "We demand immediate assistance," she declared, her tentacles writhing with a mixture of fear and fury. "The Confederation Charter requires mutual defense. The Charter requires deliberation before military deployment," the Centauri representative countered. "We cannot simply send our fleets without proper authorization. There is no time for deliberation. Our people are dying. All the more reason to proceed carefully." A hasty response could make the situation worse. The debate continued as it always did, voices rising and falling in patterns that had repeated themselves for centuries. Procedure and protocol taking precedence over the lives that were being lost with every passing minute. Then a new signal cut through the chambers. Communication systems, it was not a Confederation frequency, and it bypassed every security protocol the station possessed as if they did not exist. Ambassador Linda Harper's face appeared on the main display, and the chamber fell instantly silent. She was no longer wearing the formal diplomatic attire she had worn during her last visit. Instead, she was dressed in the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with only a small pin, bearing humanity's flag as decoration. "Arbiter Kethvorin," she said, and her voice was calm and controlled. "Distinguished representatives, I am contacting you as a courtesy. Humanity is aware of the attack on Vast Reach." The Dralith Matriarch surged forward toward the holographic projector. "Then help us. You spoke of joint action at your last presentation. Here is your chance to prove your species is worthy of respect." "With respect, Matriarch, you declined that offer repeatedly for 8 years. You laughed at our proposal and told us we were too young to understand galactic politics. We were wrong," the Matriarch said, and there was genuine desperation in her voice now. "We admit this freely, please. I am begging you." Linda's expression did not change. Her eyes remained steady, and her voice remained even as she delivered her response. "Humanity's fleet is already en route to Vast Reach. We will engage the Void Reapers within 6 hours." Murmurs erupted throughout the chamber as representatives frantically accessed their intelligence feeds, trying to verify the claim that seemed impossible by every calculation they could perform. "That cannot be accurate," the Centauri delegate announced, his scale shifting to colors that indicated extreme skepticism. "Human space is 47 hours from Vast Reach at maximum drive speed. We have monitored your fleet movements continuously. Your nearest vessels are at least 60 hours away." Linda almost smiled. "You monitored what we allowed you to monitor, Representative. Nothing more." The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. "Admiral Cole will make contact with your colonial defense forces upon arrival," Linda continued. "I strongly recommend they follow his instructions precisely. The Admiral has experience with the Reapers that your commanders lack." "What experience?" Kethvorin asked, and his voice carried a note of concern that he could not quite hide. "Humanity has never engaged the Void Reapers in combat, that you know of," Linda replied. And then the transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. Chamber erupted into chaos as representatives shouted at each other and demanded explanations that no one could. Providekathoverin immediately ordered all available Confederation ships to Vast Reach, mobilizing a relief force that would demonstrate the Council's commitment. to mutual defense even if it arrived too late to make a vital difference. The combined Confederation fleet arrived 31 hours later. The battle was already over. What they found when they emerged from faster-than-light travel defied everything they thought they knew about humanity and human capabilities. The Void Reaper attack force had been completely destroyed. Thousands of machine ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris that drifted through the system, like metallic snow and around the planet, maintaining defensive positions that covered every approach vector. Floated a human fleet that numbered not 800 ships, but over 3,000. They were vessels of designs the Confederation had never seen, sleek and angular and bristling with weapons that had torn through the Reaper Armada with devastating efficiency. Admiral Victor Cole's flagship broadcast a simple message to the arriving Confederation forces: the colony is secure. Humanitarian assistance for the civilian population would be appreciated. Military assistance is not required. The Dralith commander who led the Confederation relief force requested permission to approach and received coordinates for a safe corridor through the human defensive perimeter. As his ship passed the human vessels, he studied them through the observation ports with growing amazement. These were not the primitive warships that Confederation intelligence had catalogued and dismissed. These were weapons of war, built by a species that understood combat at a fundamental level that the elder races had apparently forgotten. How many did they lose? He asked his sensor officer. Quietly. 47 vessels destroyed, Admiral. Approximately 2,300 personnel killed, and the Reaper's complete destruction. Not a single machine ship remains operational. The Dralith commander sat back in his chair and tried to process what he was seeing. Humanity had just accomplished in a single battle what the Confederation had failed to achieve in a century of deliberation and planning. They had met the Void Reapers in direct combat, and they had won decisively on Nexus Prime. Keth Vorn watched the sensor readings and tactical reports with compound eyes that had witnessed many impossible things over his long life, but nothing had prepared him for this. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities from the galaxy for decades, building in secret, training in secret, preparing for a moment that they knew would eventually come. And now that moment had arrived. He thought about Linda Harper's final words before she left the council chamber all those months ago. Fine. We will handle it. She had meant exactly what she said. And Keth Vorn realized with terrible clarity that he had no idea what else humanity might be hiding. What other capabilities had they concealed behind a mask of apparent weakness? What else did the Confederation not know about the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel? And most importantly, what would humanity do now that their secret was revealed? These questions kept Keth Vorn awake through the night as reports continued to arrive from vast reach, each one painting a clearer picture of a species that the galaxy had catastrophically underestimated. The age of human deference to elder races was over. Something new was beginning, and Keth Vorn suspected that the Confederation would never be the same again. The Battle of Vast Reach was only the beginning of what historians would later call the Human Reaper War, a campaign that lasted 18 months and rewrote everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare and the species that had mastered it. Admiral Victor Cole did not fight the way the Confederation expected. He did not establish defensive perimeters around vulnerable colonies. He did not wait for the enemy to come to him. And he did not waste time with the cautious strategies that elder races had employed for millennia. Instead, he took the war directly to the Void Reapers in their own territory. Human strike groups appeared in systems that the machines had controlled for decades, emerging from faster-than-light travel without warning and hitting manufacturing facilities and supply depots with precision strikes that left nothing but wreckage behind. The Reapers attempted to predict where the Humans would strike next and failed repeatedly. Their machine intelligence unable to comprehend the intuitive leaps and calculated risks that human commanders made as naturally as breathing when the Reapers tried to retaliate by attacking human colonies. They found them defended by weapons platforms that seemed to anticipate their every move. Automated systems that targeted their ships before they could even begin their attack. Run's Captain Maria Santos became the most feared human commander in the galaxy, leading a strike group called the Iron Wolves that specialized in operations deep behind enemy lines. She was relentless and creative and absolutely unwilling to accept the word impossible as anything other than a challenge to be overcome. 3 months into the campaign, she received orders that would have made any other commander hesitate. Intel has located the central processing hub. Admiral Cole told her via encrypted communication. It coordinates all Reaper operations across the galaxy. Destroy it, and we cripple their ability to function as a unified force. Santa studied the tactical data and felt her stomach tighten. The hub was located in a system surrounded by over 2,000 Reaper combat units. It was the most heavily defended position the machines possessed. What resources can you provide for this mission? Admiral, 40 ships. The line was silent for a long moment as Santos processed what she was being asked to do. 40 ships against 2,000. She said finally, I know what I am asking. Captain, if you tell me it cannot be done, I will believe you and find another approach. Santos looked at the faces of her bridge crew. Men and women who had followed her into impossible situations before and emerged victorious through skill and determination and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. It can be done, she said. But we will need a distraction. What kind of distraction? The kind that makes 2,000 Reapers forget about everything except trying to kill us. The plan that Santos developed was studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries afterward. Not because it was elegant or sophisticated, but because it was audacious beyond anything the machines or the Confederation could have imagined her. 40 ships would engage the entire Reaper defensive fleet directly, while a small team of specialists in stealth pods infiltrated the system and made their way to the processing hub. Lieutenant Commander Amy Cross led the infiltration team personally. 12 people in pods barely large enough to hold a single body, drifting through the chaos of battle toward a target that could end the war if they reached it. Insertion pods launched. Cross reported over the tactical channel. We will reach the hub in 4 hours. Understood, Santos replied as her ship shuddered under the impact of Reaper weapons fire. We will keep them busy. What followed was 4 hours and 17 minutes of the most intense combat any human crew had ever experienced. Santos commanded her ships like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction, using the debris fields and the Reaper's own disabled vessels as cover, drawing the enemy into traps and ambush that whittled down their numbers one engagement at a time. Her pilots performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, threading their ships through gaps in the Reaper formations that existed for only seconds before closing, striking at weak points with accuracy that bordered on precognitive. Dennis Park kept the engines running on ships that had taken damage that would have crippled any Confederation vessel, rerouting power through backup systems and improvising repairs while enemy fire hammered against the hull shields at 12%. The tactical officer reported as another salvo struck the flagship. Reroute power from non-essential systems. Santos ordered, We already did that, Captain. Twice. Then find something else that is not essential and take its power too. The battle raged across the system as Cross and her team drifted closer to the processing hub, their stealth systems hiding them from Reaper sensors that were focused entirely on the human ships that refused to stop fighting. When 23 of Santos's ships had been destroyed, and the remaining 17 were barely holding together. Cross finally reached the hub package delivered, she reported, her voice tight with exhaustion and adrenaline. Detonation in 60 seconds. All ships, Santos broadcast. Maximum speed away from the hub. Now, the surviving human vessels turned and accelerated on whatever power their damaged engines could still produce, racing against a countdown that would determine whether their sacrifice had, meaning the processing hub exploded with a force that turned the entire inner system into a sphere of expanding fire. The chain reaction spreading to the Reapers, power generators and fuel stores and weapons caches until a whole region of space became a temporary sun when the light faded. The central intelligence that had coordinated Void Reaper operations across the galaxy was gone across known space. Reaper forces that had been operating with perfect synchronization suddenly fell into chaos, their attacks becoming uncoordinated and predictable, their defenses full of gaps that human commanders exploited without mercy. The Confederation watched in stunned silence as humanity did what 12 elder races had not been able to accomplish in a century of debate and deliberation. Ambassador Linda Harper returned to the council chamber unannounced 3 days after the hub's destruction, walking in during a session and taking her seat as if she had never been away. The Void Reaper threat has been reduced by approximately 60%, she announced to the shocked representatives. We estimate full neutralization within 8 months. At what cost? Arbiter Keth Voran asked quietly. Significant, Linda replied without emotion. We have lost over 400 ships and nearly 50,000 personnel. 17 colony settlements have sustained damage, 3 of them severe. Why? The Orvani delegate asked, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. Why did you sacrifice so much for colonies that belong to species who dismissed and mocked you? Linda looked at him for a long moment before responding. Because someone had to. And you would not. She stood and addressed the entire chamber. Humanity will continue operations until the threat is completely eliminated. We ask nothing from the Confederation. We expect nothing from the Confederation. When this is over, we will discuss what kind of relationship we wish to have with this body going forward. She walked out before anyone could respond. The chamber remained silent for a very long time afterward, each representative contemplating what they had witnessed and what it meant for the future of galactic civilization. Humanity had proven something that went beyond military capability. They had demonstrated a willingness to bear any burden and pay any price for what they believed was right, and that was more terrifying than any weapon could ever be. The final battle of the Human Reaper War took place in a system designated Omega-7 on human star charts, a region of space that had served as the last stronghold of the Void Reapers after their central processing hub was destroyed. Admiral Victor Cole led the combined human fleet personally, 3,200 ships, against the remaining machine forces that had gathered. For a final desperate stand, the Reapers knew they were facing extinction, and they fought with a fury that transcended their programming, throwing everything they had at the human armada in waves of metal and fire that seemed endless. The battle lasted for 11 days. Cole commanded from the bridge of the Resolute with Captain Santos at his side coordinating tactical movements across a battlefield that spanned millions of kilometers. Her voice hoarse from days of continuous orders, but her mind still sharp and focused. Commander Dennis Park performed miracles in the engine room, keeping the flagship operational through damage that should have destroyed her 3 times over, welding broken systems together with whatever materials he could find and refusing to abandon his post even when his hands were burned and his body was exhausted beyond measure. Lieutenant Commander Amy Cross coordinated intelligence across the entire fleet from her station, predicting enemy movements with the same uncanny accuracy that had made the hub operation possible, feeding information to commanders who had learned to trust her analysis without question. On the seventh day, the Reapers launched a concentrated assault against the human command ships, recognizing that destroying the leadership might break the cohesion of the Fleet 50. Human vessels formed a protective wall around the Resolute and fought until their ammunition was exhausted and their hulls were torn open to space, buying time for the flagship to escape the trap. None of those 50 ships survived. Cole watched them die on his tactical display, each vessel representing hundreds of people who had given everything for a mission they believed in. And he felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. "Admiral," Santos said quietly during a brief lull in the fighting, "we have lost over half our fleet. I know. Do we continue?" Cole looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death over the past 2 years. Eyes that belonged to a man who carried the burden of every life lost under his command. "We finish this," he said. "No matter what it costs, we finish this today." On the 11th day, the last Void Reaper combat unit was destroyed by a concentrated barrage from what remained of the human fleet. The machines that had terrorized the galaxy for over a century were finally gone. The human fleet was battered and broken. More than half their ships destroyed or damaged beyond immediate repair. Their crews exhausted and traumatized and grieving for comrades who would never come home, but they had won 3 days after the battle ended. High Arbiter Keth Voran traveled to the Resolute aboard a small diplomatic shuttle. It was the first time in 400 years that a sitting High Arbiter had left Nexus Prime for any reason. And the significance of that gesture was not lost on anyone who witnessed it. Admiral Cole met him in the ship's hangar bay. Standing amid the debris and damage that had not yet been cleared, the Admiral looked 20 years older than he had when the war began. His uniform stained with lubricant and burn marks from the final battle. Dark circles under his eyes from the 40 hours he had been awake. "Arbiter," he said simply. Keth Voran's antennae lowered in the formal gesture of deep respect that his species reserved for only the most honored individuals. "Admiral Cole, I come to offer the Confederation's gratitude and to discuss the future relationship between humanity and the elder races." "The future," Cole repeated. And there was something hollow in his voice. "The Confederation has failed humanity. We recognize this truth now, even if we were blind to it before. We wish to make amends for our dismissal and our arrogance." Cole turned and looked out at the debris field, visible through the hangar's atmospheric shield. The wreckage of thousands of ships, both human and Reaper, drifting in the void like a graveyard that stretched beyond the horizon. "I lost good people out there. Arbiter, friends and colleagues and young officers who had their whole lives ahead of them. Because no one else would act. Because your council valued deliberation over lives that were being lost every day." "Yes," Keth Voran acknowledged. "That is true. So what kind of amends could possibly matter now?" The Arbiter had no answer to that question. Ambassador Linda Harper arrived 6 hours later aboard a transport from Earth, and she met with Keth Voran in the Admiral's quarters, while Cole finally allowed himself to sleep for the first time in days. "The Confederation wishes to offer humanity a permanent seat on the High Council," Keth Voran told her, "with full voting rights and veto authority over any decision that affects human interests." Linda considered the offer carefully before responding. "That is more than any other species has ever been given. Humanity has done more than any other species has ever done. You have earned privileges that no one else can claim. What will the other member races say about such an offer? They will accept it because they have no choice. Or they will leave the Confederation and face the future alone. Their opinion is less relevant now than it has ever been." Linda almost smiled at that, but stopped herself. "We will consider the offer and provide a response through official channels. That is all I ask. But understand something. Arbiter, Linda said, and her voice carried the same steel it had carried in the council chamber 2 years before. Humanity did not do this for recognition or power or a seat at your table. We did it because it was right. Because innocent people were dying, and no one else would lift a finger to stop it. I understand. Do you? Do you truly comprehend what that means for the future? Keth Vorn waited for her to continue. It means that the next time there is a crisis, the next time innocent lives are threatened anywhere in this galaxy, humanity is not going to wait for your council to debate the proper response. We are not going to ask for permission or approval. We are simply going to act. And if the council objects to such unilateral action— Linda stood and walked to the observation window where the repair drones were, working tirelessly to restore the damaged ships that had survived the war. Then I suppose you will have to decide what matters more to you. Your procedures or your principles, your protocols or the lives of the people those protocols are supposed to protect. She turned back to face the ancient being who had ruled the Confederation for 6 centuries. When humans say, "Fine, I will handle it," we mean exactly what we say, every single time without exception. That is not a threat or a warning, Arbiter. It is simply who we are as a species. Keth Vorn rose slowly from his seat, his joints protesting after nearly 1,000 years of life. And he looked at this human woman who spoke with such quiet certainty about things that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. He had witnessed empires rise and fall. He had guided the Confederation through countless crises. He had seen species that seemed destined for greatness fade into obscurity, while others emerged from nothing to reshape the galaxy. But in this moment, looking at Linda Harper and thinking about everything her people had accomplished and sacrificed, he understood something profound and humbling. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. And nothing would ever be the same again. I believe, he said finally, that the Confederation has much to learn from your species, Ambassador Harper. And I hope we have wisdom enough to learn those lessons before it is too late. Linda nodded. Yes, Arbiter, you do. She extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement and respect. And after a moment of hesitation, Keth Vorn reached out with one of his 4 arms and accepted it. Outside the observation window, the stars burned cold and distant, witnesses to a moment that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Humanity had announced themselves to the galaxy not with words or diplomacy, but with action and sacrifice, proving that sometimes the youngest voice in the room is the one that speaks the most important truth. And across the Confederation, from the oldest to civilizations to the newest members, beings of every species look toward human space with a mixture of respect and uncertainty, and something that might have been hope, because if humanity could accomplish the impossible when everyone else said it could not be done, perhaps the future held possibilities that none of them had ever dared to imagine. The age of human deference was over. The age of human leadership had begun.